Hendrick Motorsports will return to the Xfinity Series in 2023. Jordan Anderson Racing announces their 2023 driver lineup, and Andretti will field a Formula One team powered by Cadillac, and Stu Ross Racing has revealed their 2023 crew chief lineup. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to another video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just shove straight those really quickly. We're going to start by talking about Ferris Motors, as it was announced yesterday that Ferris Motors has announced a partnership with Homer Friesen Racing for multiple races in 2023. Those races they'll sponsor Stuart Friesen in 2023 are as follows: Texas, Bristol Dirt, North Wilkesboro, Worldwide Technology Raceway, Nashville, and the Milwaukee Mile. I believe Ferris Motors did sponsor Stuart Friesen for the Darlington Throwback race, but there weren't a lot of races that they sponsored, so it's really good to see that there'll be different colors on the 52 truck next year. Excited to see that they'll have that sponsorship in the race, and excited to see that Ferris Motors is going to sponsor them in 2023. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Rolex 24. As it was announced yesterday that the Rolex 24 field is going to be expanded from 60 to 61 cars, after it was announced that the 75 Mercedes-AMG Sun Energy car will enter the event. Excited to see that the Rolex 24 will be increasing their numbers. There actually are 70 cars technically who want to enter. There's a bunch of cars on the reserve list because there's a lot of interest in this year's Rolex 24, especially with the GTP class. I think it's really exciting to see that they are expanding the field in 2023 for that event. I think it's massive news, and like I said, excited to see that we will see the Rolex 24 field extended in 2023. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about GMS Racing. As it was announced this morning that GMS Racing will not be fielding an ARCA team in 2023, as they focus on their endeavors in the Truck Series and in the Cup Series as well. This is kind of not a surprise considering that they have Daniel Dye moving up full-time to the Truck Series. And with them expanding their truck program from 2 trucks to 3 trucks, it's a really good decision, in my opinion, for them to not run it. Now, there is a possibility long-term that do bring the ARCA program back, but I think as of right now, with them focusing on trying to focus on getting their truck program back up to shape, with them expanding next year, it's not a big surprise to me that they are downsizing and not running their ARCA program. But ARCA lost another big team. They've lost a lot of big teams. They also lost Kyle Busch Motorsports for this upcoming season, so you don't have as much depth going into the 2023 ARCA season, and with another driver coming in we'll talk about here very soon. I think it's a solid decision. I know a lot of people are not going to agree with me on that, and that's fine, but it's disappointing. Again, it is disappointing that GMS is not entering a ARCA program this year, but it's not a big surprise considering the fact that they basically don't have Daniel Dye running anymore, and they don't have the sponsorship funding coming for that team as they move that up to the Truck Series. So not a big shock to me that GMS is not fielding an ARCA team in 2023. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Daytona Speedway schedule. As the Daytona Speedway schedule has been officially revealed, and it's very similar to the tentative schedule we've seen from multiple reporters, including Bob Pockers. So there will be no practice before the duels. There will be on Wednesday you'll have qualifying, and then on Thursday you'll have the duels at Daytona. Friday, we'll have, I think, 1 or 2 practice sessions after the duels are complete, and then for the Daytona 500, on Sunday, you'll have the 500. I'm a little disappointed there's a lack of practice for Speed Weeks because, again, Speed Weeks continues to be shortened down and cut down. At this point, just make it a normal weekend. Don't have all this special event and make it like Speed Weeks when you're continuing to cut down on your event, especially if you're going to have a big event like the Daytona 500. You would basically think that cutting down would make a lot of sense, but unfortunately, they're making decisions that don't make sense, and it sounds like practice qualifying format is going to be similar as they had it in 2022, which is a shame. Very disappointing that the Daytona Speedway schedule is a little bit cracking down. It's very disappointing in my opinion, and it really sucks. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Busch. As it was announced a couple days ago on Wednesday morning that the Rowdy documentary is going to be available on Amazon on February the 3rd. The Rowdy documentary came out, I think, around the National Weekend in 2022, but only appeared one time in theaters. I think it's really awesome to see that the Rowdy documentary is going to be coming out on Amazon. From what I've heard, the movie's in the documentary is actually really good, and I'm definitely going to try to tune into that on February 3rd. I think I've got an Amazon subscription, if I'm not mistaken, so I'm definitely going to try to tune into that Rowdy documentary, purchase it for sure, and tune into the Rowdy documentary. But I'm excited to see that Amazon has picked that up. I think it's a great decision that they have done that, and great to see that we're going to see the new Rowdy documentary. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Tyler Reddick. As basically there's a lot of questions around what sponsors Tyler Reddick is going to have for 2023. Well, it sounds like Steve Lauletta has kind of confirmed that, and he's expected to have the same sponsors that Kurt Busch had and Bubba Wallace had in 2022. Those sponsors that they had, including Embrace Home Loans, Monster Energy, which we'll talk about here later in this episode, McDonald's, DoorDash, I think, that sponsored a 45 car at one point, Moneyline, and there's a couple of sponsors like Sirius and Toyota that sponsored a 45 car as well. While it's not officially announced at this point, which we're about a month away from the Daytona 500, we're 43 days from the Daytona 500, 44 days from the Daytona 500, but we are getting really close to the Daytona 500, so we do sooner rather than later, we do need to get this announced on what sponsors will sponsor him. But like I said, it sounds like that Tyler Reddick is going to have pretty much the same sponsors that Kurt Busch had in 2023. When those do get announced and officially announced, those will break on here. But it sounds like they're going to be expanding how many people they're going to be sponsoring, which we'll talk about that here shortly. But Tyler Reddick will have those sponsors in 2023. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kaulig Racing. As Kaulig Racing has announced their 2023 crew chief lineup, and it's basically going to be the same crew chief lineup they had in 2022. So AJ Allmendinger will have Matt Swiderski. I kind of broke that on this channel a few weeks ago, that Matt Swiderski was going to be the crew chief for AJ Allmendinger, but now it has been officially confirmed that he was, of course, crew chief for the 16 car last year in Cup. He'll be the crew chief for AJ on a full-time basis. And also, Justin Haley will once again have Trent Owens. I think it's a really great decision to keep the crew chiefs the same, considering I think both cars did have some really big step up in performance. They've actually got a new shop for 2023, which is really, really exciting, and I think that Kaulig could take major steps. I think this team has really set themselves up, especially in their Cup program, for a really bright future, and the fact that they've got a new facility is a really good thing. And like I said, it is very exciting to see that Kaulig Racing is making some big moves, and that is going to be the crew chief lineup, which I think the crew chief lineup is very, very solid and is very, very stacked going into the season. So really great news, very exciting to see, and happy to see that the crew chief lineup has been set for Kaulig Racing for 2023. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Stuart Friesen. Now, Casey Campbell, I believe, interviewed Stuart Friesen very, very recently, and Stuart Friesen confirmed a couple things for 2023. He confirmed that John Leonard, who was his crew chief for most of the 2022 season, will continue being the crew chief for Stuart Friesen in 2023. It also confirmed that Toyota will continue to have a partnership with Homer Friesen Racing. There were some people suggesting that they were going to switch away from Toyota and maybe go to Ford, but now it's been confirmed that they will stay with Toyota in 2023. And also, he kind of confirmed that the goal for Lane Riggs is for them to run him full-time. We kind of talked about this on the channel a few weeks ago, that they're trying to get Lane Riggs to be full-time, but it is right now they're still working on trying to get the sponsorship and funding set for Lane, but they'll get Lane in as many races as possible. So that's some really good news if you're a Lane Riggs fan, that they really want him full-time, because Lane Riggs had some really strong runs, especially with Homer Friesen Racing last year. I remember at, I think it was IRP, where he's up front, qualified really well, and I think he got a top 5 finish in that event. And also at Phoenix, I know the race didn't end as well, but he ended up having a really strong performance at Phoenix, where he actually was up front, started on the front row, and led, I think, 7 or 8 laps early in the event, and was one of the front runners early before the truck unfortunately fell off. I think it's great that they're trying to keep the core lineup though over there, keep Lane over there. They've also announced that they'll have Jessica Friesen on that team for the Bristol Dirt Race. Of course, there's only one dirt race for the Truck Series in 2023 compared to 2 from last year. But I will say that it's great to see that Stuart Friesen, he's going to have a very good core lineup going into next year, and I think that team is setting themselves up for a really bright future. So really good to see for sure, and Stuart Friesen will have the lineup set for 2023 very, very soon. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Frankie Muniz. Now, I think it was the pit lane that reported this. It does a lot of ARCA rumors, but it's rumored at the moment that Frankie Muniz will be joining Retta Jones Racing on a full-time basis in ARCA in 2023. Now, Frankie Muniz, of course, an actor from Malcolm in the Middle and also Agent Cody Banks. He's been trying to get into the world of racing for the last year or two, and he's kind of said that he's been wanting to get into racing and race full-time. He's been sending out some pretty cryptic tweets, basically saying about how his wife in his fire suits and all that kind of stuff on basically his Twitter page. Now, Frankie Muniz, I'm very intrigued to see how he'll do in this ride. Now, Retta Jones Racing, let's be honest, they've kind of struggled for the last 2 years, and their performance hasn't been that great. They've only won one ARCA East race in their time, and that, of course, came when they had Spencer Davis driving for the organization. But they haven't had a lot of success. I think a lot of his equipment and funding. They had Amber Balkeen drive for their organization, and she had a lot of bad luck. Don't get me wrong, her performance wasn't fantastic, but I will say that she had a lot of bad luck. And she did, every time she was having a good run, it seemed like something was going wrong for her, and a lot of people just were driving way in over their heads in ARCA. But that's nothing new with ARCA. A lot of people drive in way over their heads in that series. So I'm not sure if Frankie's going to do it. It's exciting he wants to come over, but I don't know how he's going to perform. He may end up being a bust in this series, but I do like the fact he's interested in coming in racing. I like that we're getting more interest from people in different background stuff, and I'm very intrigued to see how he'll do, but I'm not sure how his performance is going to be. We're just going to have to wait and see what happens in regards to Frankie Muniz and how he performs. I hope he can do good, but I'm not sure how he will do, but we're just going to have to wait and see what happens in regards to his performance. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Spencer Boyd. As it was announced on Wednesday morning that Spencer Boyd will return to Young's Motorsports in 2023, driving the number 12 truck. Spencer Boyd has driven for Young's Motorsports since 2019, and I'm going to be for real, Spencer Boyd has struggled at Young's Motorsports. The only major accomplishments, there's been a couple things he's been notable for. First, he got in a fight with Natalie Decker. That was something notable. He got a fight with her. But his other notable moment is he did win a very controversial truck race at Talladega. Now, don't get me wrong. Spencer Boyd, I am a fan of because he is from the St. Louis area. But I'm going to be for real about Spencer Boyd. Spencer Boyd has not been the greatest driver. He's performed kind of not that great. And drivers at his organization he's driven for, they've been better than him. He's kind of struggled. I think he's DNQ'd for some race in the past 2 years, and I know that he wants to perform good. He's a blue-collar guy. He's worked hard to make a name for himself and do good, but I just haven't seen the great performances, and I've not been impressed by Spencer Boyd the last couple of years, and I just think that they've been struggling in a really big way. Again, I think Young's maybe needs to downsize. That's just my opinion. I don't think the fact they've got 3 trucks, because we're going to have 3 trucks again this season, and there's rumors about Tyler Young maybe being involved in other affiliations with other organizations, but I just don't know what Spencer's going to do. I'm a little worried about Spencer going the year, and I don't know how he's going to perform, and I'm not sure how well he's going to do. So I hope Spencer can do good this season. A goal for him, I think, is to try to get maybe some top 15s, some top 20s. But I'll be honest, I think he's going to struggle this season again like he has, and I know he wants to do good, but he just has not been that impressive. So I hope Spencer can do well. I really want to see him do good, but I don't know how he's going to do. So hopefully he can do good. We'll have to wait and see how his performance is going to end up being with the team. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about 2311 Racing. As according to Phil Spain, who basically Spain Law, who works for Pitbox Press, he put out a tweet showing the updated bio for 2311 Racing. And if you take a look at that bio, you can see 3 names on there. You have Bubba Wallace, of course, who drives the 23. Tyler Reddick, who drives the 45 this season. And you also see that Kurt Busch is still here. It sounds like to me that I kind of talked about this, but it sounds like the 2311 Racing is trying to get a third potential entry for Kurt Busch to run in 2023. And they've talked about potentially expanding their program to a third car for other drivers to potentially race. Let's talk about Kurt Busch. Kurt Busch obviously will not be running full-time in 2023, as after his concussion-like symptoms and concussion that he ended up suffering, he unfortunately has been silent as of now. Now, he's still not been medically cleared to race at this point, but Kurt has said that if he is medically cleared to race in 2023, he will make some starts. Kurt has said that his goal is he wants to run for sure at Watkins Glen, at Darlington in the Cup Series, because he's never won at those tracks. I know he's won an Xfinity Series at Watkins Glen, but I think he wants to win a Cup race there, and of course he wants to win the Southern 500 as well. And he also has ambitions to race in Australia. He's been in Australia as of recently, and he also wants to race in the 24 Hours of Le Mans as well. And to be honest with you, I really hope that Kurt Busch can race. I'm also hoping that Kurt could be a commentator on the Fox Sports team, though, because I think Kurt Busch would do a really good job as a commentator. I think he's done a really solid job when he has been a commentator. So I would love for him to get the opportunity to be a commentator once again in this series. So I think it would be awesome for sure if he can. But it's exciting to see that they're making big moves. And Kurt also, obviously, I think is going to have a lot of good stuff to do with that team. I think he'll do a really good job helping coach Bubba Wallace and also Reddick, and he's already been giving advice to Tyler, which is a great thing for that team, because giving advice to Reddick is a good thing. You need to give advice to a driver who is young and aggressive but has a lot of potential to be successful. I just think right now there's a lot of great things going on with 23XI Racing, and I think they're setting themselves up for a really bright future going into the future. So I'm definitely for sure excited to see what Reddick can do going into this season. Not Reddick, Kurt Busch. And we'll see if he does make some starts, but I know he does want to make starts in 2023, and it sounds like they're going to try to get him some starts here in 2023. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the SRX. As it was tweeted out by Don Hawk a couple days ago, that the SRX is expected to make some pretty big announcements soon. What are those announcements? Well, it sounds like they're going to be looking to try to get some sponsors and some drivers for the series. There's been a lot of tweets coming out as of recently of the SRX trying to get some drivers to race in the series. Among the drivers they want to race in the SRX are as follows. Hailie Deegan, she's been a driver they really want to bring into the series once again. They would love to have her back in the series. She's been successful with the SRX, so they've been trying to get her. They've been trying to get Kyle Larson to run in the SRX. Kyle Larson obviously is a driver who's a superstar, who has a lot of superstar background. He'd be great to have over in Missouri and race over there. They've tried to get Eric Jones. They've tried to get Chase Elliott back in the series. I don't know if he will with the A-Shock situation, with them leaving NASCAR and basically leaving Chase Elliott. I don't know if they will come and Chase will come over there and race, among other things. There's other drivers that are interested in. Kyle Busch is another one they kind of brought up. Kurt Busch's name has been brought in the conversations. Among other drivers they want to bring into the series. The SRX also tried to co-host Kevin Harvick. Stafford sent out a tweet very recently that they've been trying to get Kevin Harvick to race in this series. I think the SRX setting themselves up for a really bright future, and there's a lot of great things going on with that series at the moment, that if you're a fan of the SRX, you should be really excited about what's going on with that series. And I think they're literally, like I said, I think they're setting themselves up for a really great future, and they're going to have a lot of big names this year, bigger than I think we've seen. There's probably going to be full-time drivers, of course, like Tony Stewart in the series, but you're going to have a lot of really cool names, I think, racing in the SRX this upcoming season, and I think it's setting themselves up for really great things. So exciting for sure to see that the SRX is working to get some big things done in the series. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Monster Energy, as we have now found out one of Ty Gibbs' sponsors for 2023 in the Cup Series. According to Adam Stern, Monster Energy will sponsor Ty Gibbs in a strong capacity in his rookie NASCAR Cup Series campaign in 2023, per Monster executive Mitch Covington. He declined to give specifics, citing a forthcoming announcement, but the brand will have a fair number of primaries with Joe Gibbs Racing. According to Eric Esab, what he said on his channel, basically he said that they sponsored him, I think, for 21 out of 33 races this past season, Xfinity, and the number probably will be a little bit less, especially since Monster Energy is working with a lot of drivers this upcoming season. They're expected to work with not only Ty Gibbs, but they're also expected to work with Tyler Reddick. They're also expected to work with Hailie Deegan again this upcoming season, and they're also expected to work with Riley Herbst this season. Now, of course, obviously, I think Reddick is going to be replacing Kurt Busch, unless, of course, like I said, Kurt Busch does decide to make a return. They would have 5 drivers in NASCAR's top 3 divisions they'd be working with, and they'd be in all different manufacturers outside of the Chevy brand. They'd be basically working over there with that branding. But it's really good to see that Ty Gibbs does have some sponsorship. Again, my prediction is that Ty will probably have around half a season sponsored by Monster Energy. So the big question is what other companies will sponsor Ty for the season. I do think you'll see some other companies come into play and sponsor Ty throughout the season. I think you'll see Interstate Battery sponsor him for a majority of the year. I think you will see other companies like you'll see Bass Pro Shops jump over and sponsor him for a couple races. Maybe you'll see DeWalt sponsor him. I think you're going to see a lot of companies come over. Maybe Shriners Hospital as well does decide to sponsor Ty Gibbs this upcoming season. But I do think it's great to see that Monster Energy is going to be stepping up their sponsorship role with Ty Gibbs. Again, it's probably going to be less than they sponsored him in Xfinity because they're going to be asking for more money. But then again, Monster Energy may be spreading themselves too thin. But then again, they have a lot of companies and people that they're sponsoring at the moment. So we'll see what happens in regards to how many races they decide to sponsor. But they'll sponsor for a good number of races in 2023. And honestly, it's good to see that they will sponsor him, at least so, in a lot of races this upcoming season. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Stewart-Haas Racing, as their 2023 crew chief lineup has been officially announced for all this series. So beginning with Kevin Harvick, he once again will have Rodney Childers in 2023. Rodney and Kevin have worked really, really well together since 2014, so not a surprise they're keeping them together. Chase Briscoe will have Johnny Klosmeyer once again for the third year in a row. Well, second year in a row, because Johnny was a crew chief for Eric Almirola in 2021. Chase will once again have Johnny Klosmeyer. Eric Almirola once again will have Drew Blickensterfer for a second year in a row. Let's be honest, performance wasn't great, but he'll have Drew Blickensterfer this upcoming season. But the big change for the Cup Series is for Ryan Preece. Ryan Preece is working with long-term crew chief, who is a former Tony Stewart crew chief, in Chad Johnson. Chad Johnson has been a crew chief for many, many years. He crew chief I think, 1 point for Juan Pablo Montoya. He also, I think, crew chief for Kyle Larson, also Martin Truex Jr., and also Tony Stewart as well. And he also crew chief for Ryan Preece last year in the Truck Series as well. So they've had a really good working relationship together, and I think that will go well. The worst finish they got last year together was 11th, so I really think that they'll have a great working relationship. Chad has had some mistakes in Cup, no doubt about that, but I really do think that Chad will do a good job as a crew chief for Ryan Preece because they've had a good working relationship together, so that will be there. For the Xfinity Series, Cole Custer is going to have SHR engineer Jonathan Toney, meaning that Mike Shiplett will no longer be working with Stewart-Haas Racing. There are some rumors around where potentially he could be going, but we don't know where he's going at this point. But Jonathan Toney will be the crew chief. This will be the first time that Jonathan Toney is crew chiefing for, I think it's the first time he's ever crew chief, if I'm not mistaken. So interesting they brought him up as a crew chief this season. And then Riley Hurst will have Richard Boswell once again in 2023. This is a very solid crew chief lineup, in my opinion. Of course, there's a lot of questions about the future of Stewart-Haas Racing past 2023. Of course, Eric Almirola and Kevin Harvick's future past next year could be in question. We're supposed to know about Kevin Harvick's future within the next month or so. As Kevin said before Daytona, we're going to be knowing about his future. So any day now, we could know anything about Harvick's future. We'll just have to wait and see it over decides there. But this is a very solid crew chief lineup, in my opinion. I think Stewart-Haas Racing is setting themselves up for a really bright future going into the future. And honestly, like I said, if you're an SHR fan, this is a good decision for them to bring back the crew chiefs that they've had in the past. I think they're really doing a good thing here. And honestly, Stewart-Haas Racing is setting themselves up for a really bright future. And now we'll go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Andretti Global. As potentially one of the biggest news stories of the last 5 years in motorsports was announced yesterday. It was revealed that Andretti is going to be partnering up with Cadillac and GM for a potential Formula One entry. This is a massive, massive story for many, many reasons, because this is the first time that I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that General Motors is showing interest in getting in Formula One, which is absolutely huge. Now, they're, of course, not the first F1, basically American manufacturer enter Formula One. Chrysler partnered up with Lamborghini, I believe, back in the older days. And Ford was with the Cosworth engines back in the 60s and the 70s as well. This is, like I said, though, a massive, massive deal for many reasons. Now, one question that's kind of been answered is that GM will continue to have their partnerships in IMSA and IndyCar, so there's no changes coming over there. And Andretti will still be powered by Honda engines. Obviously, Andretti has been trying to get into Formula One now really for the last 2 years. The first we heard about them trying to get into Formula One, they tried to basically, Michael was trying to partner up with, I think it was Alfa Romeo, if I'm not mistaken, and they actually were really close to having a deal signed, but that unfortunately did not come through. Now, a lot of people are asking how much funding does he have and how is he able to get a lot of this funding? Well, they're part, I think, of the Guggenheim brand or the Googleman brand, which, of course, is part of that Group 1001 project. They also own the Los Angeles Dodgers, among other things, and that's one of the big reasons why they're having a $100 million facility built in Indiana, and there are a lot of other questions, though, to be answered. Another big question is what will happen to the team? Well, it sounds like currently at the moment that Colin Herter will be one of the drivers for the organization, and it may try to get another American driver to go over there, or maybe try to get Pat O'Ward him to basically do that. So we'll see what happens over there, quintessentially, with Pat O'Ward. We'll see if he ends up going over there. So the big other questions I kind of do end up having is, the other big question I have going into the season is what's going to end up happening with what's going to end up happening. What partner will they partner up? Because their big question with the team is, will they partner up with another brand? And could they partner up with Renault? Because they know that Renault has some interest in partnering up with the Andretti brand. We know that they kind of showed some interest in trying to get them in Formula One. It also does sound like, though, that there's a good chance that this could end up happening. The fact that Mohammed Ben Suleiman, who's the president of the FIA, is showing interest in working with the Andretti brand, I think that would be a really great decision, and it would be really good for them to get in. So I think it sounds like Mohammed is trying to get them in there. So maybe the FIA will approve it. Of course, you have people like Toto Wolff who are not interested, who really are not really interested in trying to get him in there. But again, Toto Wolff has shown no interest in supporting Andretti ever, so what's new? But this is really, really huge for Formula One in a lot of ways. The fact that you can have an American-based team will keep the American relevancy in Formula One. Formula One is heading in the right direction with the U.S. market. You've got Logan Sargent coming in to be a driver for Williams. So you have a good direction. You have an American driver support. But if you can get an American team in Formula One, whenever they get in, which I think will be like 2025 or 2026 with the new regulations coming in then, it will be big, I think, for Formula One if this can end up going through. So in my opinion, I am excited about this, that this actually can end up happening. And this is one of the biggest stories we've seen in a very, very long time. And whoever decided to go, if we know that Colton Herta for sure will be a driver, but if they can get other American drivers to race in this series, that will be huge. That will absolutely be huge for the series and will be absolutely amazing. So whoever they end up deciding to bring into the series, whoever they decide to basically bring in race for the team will be huge. And you could have an American-based team which everyone could be generally supportive. So this is a huge story, and a story we'll continue to follow as more developments come out in the future. And now we're going to jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about Jordan Anderson Racing. As Jordan Anderson Racing has officially announced their 2023 NASCAR Xfinity Series driver lineup. And they're going to be expanding their driver lineup from a one-car team to a two-car team in 2023. First, Jeb Byrne will no longer be driving for Our Motorsports in 2023, and he'll actually be moving over to Jordan Anderson Racing to drive the number 27 for the organization. What's interesting, it sounds like that he is going to basically have the same owner's points and pretty much some of the same sponsors and the same number going into next year. He returns to the organization, basically goes over to Jordan Anderson Racing. The other addition to the team is actually one that surprised me. Parker Retzlaff will be joining Jordan Anderson Racing to drive the number 31 on a full-time basis. Let's talk about both drivers going in. They've got sponsorship funding. Alsco will sponsor Jeb Byrne for majority of events, and you will also see Funkaway sponsor Parker Retzlaff for a lot of events as well. Let's talk about both these drivers. Let's first talk about Jeb Byrne. I think we kind of know about Jeb Byrne. I think Jeb Byrne is a decent driver, but not the greatest driver in the world. I don't think all of it was his fault last year. Let's be honest. I think Our Motorsports should not have expanded to a three-car operation like they did last year. And I think that's why they're in a lot of trouble with their future. They could be a one-car team next year. But Jeb Byrne going over to Jordan Anderson Racing, he's got a lot of veteran experience, which he's not someone who's, I think, going to do terrible with the team. He's a solid enough driver where I think he'll run okay, but I don't think he's going to be a playoff contender with the organization in 2023. I'm just not expecting to be a playoff contender because I don't think he even got a top 10 last year with Our Motorsports, so I don't know how much he's going to do. I know he's got that Xfinity win in Talladega with College Racing, but he just hasn't been the most completely impressive. On the other hand, you've got Parker Retzlaff, and I think he will outperform Jeb Byrne every single way. Parker Retzlaff made, I think, 8 or 9 starts last year in the Xfinity Series for RSS Racing, in that team, and his worst finish outside of a mechanical failure at Phoenix, which, by the way, let's also remember, I think he qualified 4th or 5th in that event. Parker Retzlaff's worst finish is 21st. He got a couple top 10s last year, had a lot of top 15s last year, got 12th in Martinsville, I think got 12th in New Hampshire as well, and had a lot of great runs with the organization of RSS Racing. And keep this in mind, Parker Retzlaff does not have a lot of real-world racing experience before 2022, had only a few ARCA starts, had not even had a full-time season, and yet at 19 years old, he's been extremely impressive because he came from the iRacing world in the Coca-Cola iRacing Series, which he drove for RFK Racing in that series. So I'm really excited to see what Parker Retzlaff can do going into the season. And I'm also really generally excited for Jordan Anderson Racing and that team right now. Their team is setting themselves up for a really bright future because just a few years ago, this team was in trouble. I mean, 2021, they missed a bunch of starts. Remember, they missed basically a third or basically almost half the season because of the rainout situation where there wasn't a lot of races where they could go out and basically qualify, and they struggled with the owner's points situation, and they got a chance to race, and they get Charlotte and then basically Dakota, and that kind of helped their chances to basically make it through the rest of the season, and they were very solid for the rest of the year. And then last year in 2022, they had Maya Snyder full-time. They kind of struggled with Maya Snyder, which we don't know his future past this year. But I think they're going into the future, and I think they're setting themselves up for a really strong season. And I honestly think, look at the Xfinity Series right now, the series is really stacked with a lot of talent. you think the series is really doing great because they lost Ty Gibbs, they lost Allmendinger, and they lost Gragson for the full season because they're going to Cup this year. But you've got a lot of great talent. You've got, of course, expansion from Sam Hunt Racing. You've got Connor Mosiak driving for a lot of the year and Kaz Grala driving full-time. You've got Alpha Prime expanding to a 3-car operation next year. You've got this team. You've got AM Racing coming in with Brett Moffitt on a full-time basis. In my opinion, you've got a really strong Xfinity Series lineup, and I think Xfinity is going to be so unpredictable this year outside of a couple drivers because I really think Xfinity is looking really strong going into the season. And like I said, I am really excited to see how the Xfinity Series is going to be in 2023. There's just a lot of great things going on with Xfinity, and I think Jordan Anderson Racing, great to see that they're expanding next year, and their lineup, I think, is really solid in my opinion. So I'm excited to see what happens in regards to them, and I'm excited to see what will happen with Jordan Anderson Racing, and I hope they do really good. I think they'll have a good year. We'll have to wait and see what happens. I don't think they make the playoffs, but we'll see what happens. And now we'll go ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Hendrick Motorsports. Now, a few months ago, I told you on this channel that Hendrick Motorsports was expected to be fielding an Xfinity Series team in 2023. Well, it was confirmed yesterday in an article that came out for Hendrick Motorsports, they will be once again fielding an Xfinity Series team this upcoming season in 2023. In 2022, Hendrick Motorsports fielded the number 17 car for 4 races. They came close to winning a bunch of races. They almost won at Road America with Kyle Larson. They finished second at the Indy Road Course with Alex Bowman. And they nearly won at Darlington with Kyle Larson. But unfortunately, they lost in the last few laps of the race after a really great and amazing battle between Noah Gragson, Sheldon Creed, and of course, Kyle Larson. The goal of this Xfinity Series team for Hendrick Motorsports is for them to win at least one race in 2023. And I think their chances this upcoming season, while the Xfinity Series field, I think, is going to be extremely strong. I think Hendrick does have a really strong chance. And the big question is what races will they run in 2023? My prediction is it's probably going to be all road courses, probably 3 road courses, and I think probably 1 non-road course track. I think they'll run the Chicago Street Course event to give one of their Cup drivers experience. My prediction for that one will probably be Kyle Larson. They will run, I think, the Indy Road Course. I think Alex Bowman will run that one. I think they potentially could run Sonoma with one of their drivers. I think maybe William Byron gets that start. And in the last start, my prediction, I would say maybe Darlington, in my opinion. I would give that one to Chase Elliott. I think all 4 drivers are going to run at least 1 race each and give each other a chance to win. And I think their chances, like I said, are going to be really good. And honestly, I do want to see this car win for one reason. I know a lot of people don't like the fact they see Cup drivers racing. And I used to be one of those people who cared a lot more about when Cup drivers race. But with the restrictions that have come into play especially, I really think that in all honesty, in all seriousness, I don't have as much of a problem with Cup drivers racing because of the restrictions they have now. They only get to run up to 5 races. Now, another big thing we'll talk about now is, will we see the Cup Hendrick drivers race there? I think there is a chance, a very big possibility, that the 88 car does have a chance of racing with the Hendrick branding. I think they'll try to get the 88 car to run. Of course, that car will run for 2 races for sure. We know that one of them, we don't know what race exactly Junior is going to run. We know that the Junior is going to run 2 races this season. I think Miguel Pluto could have a chance coming back to drive the 88 car, and I think we may see some Hendrick drivers drive there. But if they don't decide to go with some of the Hendrick drivers, who could they run? They could run some of the drivers from the Truck Series. What about Daniel Dye? That would be a great driver to bring up to maybe drive that car. What about some drivers maybe part-time for the season? They could go maybe with someone else. Maybe they give Roger Kroof an opportunity. I know it sounds crazy to say, but he got an opportunity with Spire Motorsports, which was a Hendrick-backed car. Why would maybe they not go with him for some Xfinity Series starts? I think whoever they decide to go with, though, I think they'll do a really good job. And I think, like I said, the goal for the team this season is for them to win. I think 4 races is enough, though, for the team. And, again, seeing a 17 car on track gives remembrance to Ricky Hendrick, which, again, I think giving remembrance to him is just something that is absolutely great to see. They give remembrance to him. And I really want to see that car go out there and win. And like I said, I think that they are going to have a really strong chance and a really strong shot to get it done this upcoming season, especially, like I said, they are a team that looked really good last year. They could have won every single race they entered, but they got beat by Allmendinger at the Indy Road Course. Bowman got second there. Byron, I think, ran 1 or 2 races. He looked really promising, too, in the races that he ran. And then Kyle Larson could have won both his races. He came close to winning both. Ty Gibbs just beat him on the last lap. If Ty doesn't beat him on the last lap, Larson gets the victory there. And I just think right now, looking at Hendrick Motorsports themselves, they're setting themselves up for a future. We still don't know, by the way, Alex Bowman's contract past 2023, which is something, a big storyline, I think, going into this year that we need to kind of follow and pursue going forward. But like I said, I think Hendrick Motorsports is setting themselves up for a pretty good future going into next year, and I think Hendrick will have a lot of great things on their way in the future. So I'm excited to see what they decide to do and who they decide to put behind the wheel, and probably will be announced here in the not-so-distant future. I'm excited to see who they decide to put in, and excited to see that Hendrick is for sure 100% returning to the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2023. I'm excited to see how they perform. So that is here today's NASCAR and Motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, as for me on Patreon as well. Link description below for that, and combo your thoughts below on today's video. How well do you think the Hendrick Motorsports Xfinity Series team is going to perform? Do you think they win some races or not? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Jordan Anderson Racing expanding in 2023? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow on my channel, we're going to have potentially 1 or even 2 videos on this channel. I think I'm going to have 10 potential breakout drivers in all 3 divisions in 2023. Sunday, I may do my top 20 favorite NASCAR drivers. And Monday, I may have a potential driver lineup video coming out. We'll have to wait and see. My birthday's coming around the corner, so who knows what's going to be out on the channel here in the coming days. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.